Well, I'm a veteran, obviously, as you know. I already said that. Well, and as my colleague over here said, by the way, I think the VA system is a great system. I have no problem with the VA system. I think we do have a clinic down in Victorville. We do have one clinic. I guess it's only for mental illness, however. And what would I do? Well, I think we have to look to taking care of our veterans. If we don't take care of our veterans and our children, who are we going to take care of? I don't think it's more important. But certainly our veterans and our children. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, do we need another facility? When they talk about a facility up here, as I say, we have one in Victorville, which is only 30 miles away. I don't know if that's a great distance or not. I guess for some people it is. But I guess we look at whether there's a necessity. I don't know what else to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Dr. George Craig, Angela Lytle.
It's time that we started treating our veterans like the heroes they are. They need to be compensated, cared for, and honored for their sacrifices for us and for our country. Plain and simple.
Thank you, Angela Lytle. Ryan McCaffrey.
This is simple. We need to provide for our veterans. My grandfather flew P-51s in World War II over Germany, was shot down, prisoner of war, came back, and he told me all the stories about being in World War II and what it was like to fly over Germany. But the fact of the matter is that what we're getting ready to deal with now, with the troops coming home from Iraq, ultimately from Afghanistan, what the Obama administration is saying for veterans and what they're going to have to pay more for just doesn't make any sense. We have to provide not only for our national defense, but for those who have fought for our freedom. So I'm fully in favor of bringing additional clinics here. I agree that we do have some clinics in Victorville, but that's not to say it's enough. We need more here in this situation.
Thank you. Ryan McCaffrey. Greg Williams.
I agree with the others. We need to take care of our vets. At the same time, building a new facility at this time in this area might be within a budget constraint problem, but I do know this. Over my lifetime, I've had several relatives that have been hospitalized and passed away in the VA hospital there in the Loma Linda, San Bernardino area. My personal opinion was the facility was underfunded, it was filthy, the care was minimal. I've seen a lot of veterans sitting in the hallway waiting for care in bad shape. I think they need to be properly funded so these men are better honored and taken care of in their last days. So I would support funding for our VA hospitals.
Thank you.
I'm glad that my Republican brothers think that our veterans should be funded by our government. I think that's a wonderful idea. I support it wholeheartedly.
Thank you. John Henderson.
I agree. I think it's ironic to sit up here and talk about how government is the enemy and government's the problem. We're going to slash. The reality is we are the government. It's our government, and we can decide what's best for our government. And that includes making priority of our veterans. There's no reason why we shouldn't have health care services for our veterans here in the desert. My parents are 20-year veterans of the military. My wife's parents are 20-year veterans of the military. And both of our parents have chosen to live in a place where they can actually access care. That was a fundamental decision for them when they chose where to live. Is could they actually get to a place that would provide them the medical care that the government promised them and that their tours of duty and their service demanded that they get. Absolutely we can bring a clinic up here. Absolutely we can do those things. But let's be clear. This highlights exactly the point. There is a huge problem in Congress, but I would argue that the problem is not as much spending as it is priorities.
Thank you.
It's very simple. The government doesn't need to be in this business. You could contract it. Yes, you need to oversee it. I'm not saying turn it loose. But there are hospitals here that have the full capability of providing our vets the top flight service, and there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to walk into a territory where there's no hospital and walk into an existing hospital, show my VA card, and say, I'm a vet. And there's no way that a doctor should say anything except, come on in here and sit down and take care of you. We're going to see you together. That's the simple solution. That's the private sector. I'm a reservist for 23 years. I'm retired. I'm in that zone between 60 where you don't get any coverage or any benefits until you're retired. Oh, but then when it became political, they said, for $1,200 a month, you can have COBRA. Oh, really? Thanks for the gift. Really? But we can supply illegal aliens free hospital, free college. We can't get into the college because it's full.
Thank you, Bill.
As I said earlier, I am a veteran, and I do my primary doctorate at Loma Linda, Jerry L. Pettis, Loma Linda Medical Center. And Congressman Lewis fought for that facility, so another congressman could possibly fight for another facility down here. That facility is a little overcrowded, so a lot of patients could be transferred maybe to our new district here, and with a minimum of funding, you'd have to build a building, of course, but you wouldn't need it because a lot of those patients could be transferred over. And there is a clinic on Bear Valley and Industrial in Victorville, and in fact, I'm going to give blood funding, but they don't do everything fully equipped. Hospital does, but they're there. If you have an emergency situation, you can go there. And also, I fell on my shoulder. I was helping my dad.
Thank you, Joseph Napolitano. We'll go on to our next question. Would you like to rebuttal?
Yeah.
We'll go first to Anthony Adams and then Dr. Bergstrom.
I just want to take issue with the idea that we should privatize our VA benefits. I absolutely fundamentally disagree with that. Let me make it clear. I never want to see some veteran flashing their VA card so they can stand in line behind people who don't even live in our country getting services. Stand behind a line between people who are on welfare getting services before my veterans. I'm sorry. I want to make veterans a priority. They've already made their sacrifice. It's time that we make ours.
Thank you,
I'm surprised what Greg kind of said. My experience with the VA is a very good and happy experience. And I'll give you a little history on that. When I was looking for a second opinion a couple of years ago when I was ill, I remembered what my good retired police officer in New York told me. He said, George, I got the best care I ever got in the VA hospital. So I went to the VA at Loma Linda, and I must say I mirror and agree with what he told me. I think the care is very good.
Thank you, Dr. George Craig.
I would like to rebut what Anthony said and maybe clarify so that it's a little bit more out in the open.
30 seconds of rebuttal for Dale Denton.
Thank you. What I'm referring to is the rural area like we live in now. My dad lives as a Marine down in San Fernando Valley, and he's close to one of the biggest hospitals down there, and it's easy for him to walk in the door and get pills for his heart. When we're out here in Barstow, and we've got somebody who's hurting, I could go to Dr. Craig's office and get the simple service that I need because I can't get all the way to Loma Linda. So my idea here is not to create another big federal agency building to run and drive and put more federal employees in, but if a hospital is already there, all we need to do is give the man Dr. Craig's service, and Dr. Craig earns with his own overhead the ability to pass that bill to the government.
Well, as previous law enforcement, I was a prison warden. I carry a concealed weapon with me at all times. I have a permit. Just look at Mexico. You go to Mexico, the people don't have weapons, but the cartel does, and they're at their mercy. Do you want that? That's no way to live. I will fight for our Second Amendment right. We have the right to protect ourselves.
Well, I'm 100% in favor of the Second Amendment. I would defend it to no end back there in Washington, D.C. I think it's our fundamental right, along with the First Amendment, and I'm completely in favor of that. If you wish to carry a gun, you should have that right, and I will defend that as much as I absolutely
Thank you.
I just know our Second Amendment right, it says a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I have nothing else to say. Thank you.
I support the Constitution of the United States. I've sworn to uphold it. I believe that if you want to have a gun, you should have a gun. I'm not terribly crazy about the idea that people can have whatever kind of arms that they want. Is there any limits to that? And I know that this might not be the crowd to bring that up again.
Thank you, John Pinkerton. Anthony Adams.
I'm going back to that first question. I appreciate that. The answer for me is that I'm a huge believer in that the Second Amendment needs to be preserved at all costs. I'm a lifetime member of the NRA, as I imagine I would be willing to bet at least a good majority of the people out here are. My big concern right now with the gun laws are not at the federal level. My big concern with the gun laws are really at the state level. The state of California has worked overtime to try to take away gun rights at every single turn. I think if you really want to talk about an issue that's close to home and it is probably the most important, it's our ability and I think our freedom and our liberty to be able to conceal a weapon and to not have to be at the discretion of every sheriff of the 58 counties in the state, some saying yes, some saying no, and not being able to carry your own weapon on you. A criminal doesn't ever have to ask anyone for permission to carry a gun. Yet I've got to ask for permission and beg for permission from my sheriff to be able to carry my own weapon personally. I don't want to see out there vigilantes, but I do believe that a well-armed citizenry does more to protect the people than any kind of government intrusion.
Thank you.
Wow, everybody's laid some pretty good foundational work for me here. He's right. It is the state that's taken away your rights and nibbled them away to the point that you can't get a concealed weapons permit. And if you're carrying a gun now in your car, you are a felon criminal and you cannot sit up here and run for government anymore. A simple thing that happened to Donnelly going through the airport could happen to any one of us. But had we not had the stature of Donnelly, we would have been looking at something a lot worse. Bill Jensen might have been in jail and under a felony charge, et cetera, et cetera. So he's right when he says we need to defend and protect our rights at a state level and use what Greg Imus said is the government, the federal government's ability to ensure that that law is not impeded by state laws.
Thank you.
Yes, I believe in gun rights. Personally, I don't own one, but I would die for you wanting one. And I want to have the freedom to go down and buy one if I choose. But I think there should be some, I don't want to say litmus test, but some parameters, like convicted felons, I don't think should be allowed. They're going to probably steal one from you, but at least you don't have to give them a license to go get one. And then the mentally impaired, and then who decides who's mentally impaired to own a weapon? I'm not sure about that, but I think those things, and there's probably some other things you guys can probably think of, to not just anybody off the street can just walk in and buy a gun. I don't think that's right. But I think it shouldn't be real hard either. So I think in those parameters, you've got to look at all sides of it. It's a big deal having a gun. It's a lot of responsibility.
Thank you. Joseph Napolitano. Dr. George Phil.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I believe in Second Amendment and the right to bear arms and own a weapon.